I am exhausted of seeing log footage just posting just on the timeline. No color correction, no nothing. I know some people might find it difficult, some people might find it just like overwhelming without the settings and the menus and all that stuff. That's why I'm gonna make a simple tutorial, just a basic introduction to color grading that you can use for all your edits moving forward. So right here, I have two different clips, one indoor and one outdoor, just to reflect a little bit of balance and contrast for the grades that we're gonna be doing. So let's start with the first one. This one, we have the subject indoors. As I said, we have a key light coming from the back from a window, which is mainly where the light, you can see it right here on the edge of his head, by the back of his head. All this light just coming from the window. There is some bounce right here on the side just because there's some white walls around, stuff like that, but you mainly see the shadows right here in the face. So keeping that in mind, I'm gonna open my Lumetri color. So this is how I like to have my layout. I like to have my Lumetri color on the top, Lumetri scopes at the bottom, and Lumetri scopes can be overwhelming off the rip. So let me explain to you a little bit how they work. So if you see, most of the information right here, everything that shows on the scopes is just data. It's just information, visual information that the software is picking up. In this case, it's just showing me where the exposure and the colors are distributed on the frame. In this case, everything's kind of even in the middle just because he has like a dark shirt, dark couch, stuff like that. On the right, we see where the window is at, which is pretty bright. That's where the highest point of exposure is. That's where the highlights are showing, which is so within parameter is between 10 and 100 or 0 to 100. So as long as something is not on the very limit, we're just smushed at either of one of those ends, the image is still fine. We can still work with it. So let's start off the rip. What I like to start, I go to the creative tab of my Lumetri color, go creative, saturation. Let's start with 150. So remember, log footage is just like flat, like no color, no, pretty much little of nothing, like absolutely nothing, just collecting raw data. So that way you can expose and fix those features. Might be exposure, you can fix as much as possible. It's not like a raw type of photo, but still has a lot of information that you can tweak, and you should tweak when you're post. In this case, let's do 150. I kind of like the tone. It's not super saturated or anything crazy on that screen, so I really like that. Let's add a little bit of vibrance. Let's see, 0.4. It's not bad. Let's see a little bit more. Maybe 4 actually instead of 0.4. Yeah, that's not bad. So I like how that looks off the rip. So just go now to curves. Curves is where you're gonna notice the biggest change, what you're doing with your grid. So let me show you what. We go to the first one, RGB curves. We start with that white selection, white option, and I like to start with the shadows. So let's bring this down a little bit. Remember this, so just keep it into consideration. Keeping into consideration how the context of this script, right? So what I know from this script, because I shot it, I was looking at the script when we were shooting it. This is kind of like a mystery, trying to comedy, kind of like a skit, but the vibe overall is just comedic darkness. So that tone has to be like there's something going on at this call. So keeping that in mind, I know how I want to approach it with the tone. You know, a little bit darker, not super bright, not super exposed, stuff like that. So we can just give it the actual vibe that we want for this image and for this scene. Shadows are pretty solid right there. A little bit higher. Right there is fine. Now this is gonna change the most, the mid. So if you see, I'm using just a point of reference right here on the edge. So the left corner, the middle one right here, and then we're gonna use this parameter. I don't know how you describe it, a quadrant if you want to call it. But here, let me tweak back the middle one. That looks pretty solid. It still looks a little bit dark on the shadow, so let me bring that one up. Awesome. And then the highlights, let me play around with this one. As I said, the image is not necessarily exposed for the highlights, so the shadows where most of the data is. That's what we see, like this type of vibe. I kind of like it. As I said, it's kind of like a dramatic skit, so I want to use a little bit of vignettes. So vignettes, that final option right here, I click it right here and I drop it down a little bit, so we've got more darkness. You see the darkness on the edges. Let me fix it so you can see. This is if I add positive vignettes like white. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make it more dark and more dramatic-ish. That right there is pretty solid. Okay, regarding the colors and stuff, it looks pretty balanced to me. It doesn't look like too orange or too warm or too cold. It doesn't look too magenta or too green. So I kind of like off the red the white balance. I think in the next clip we're gonna see a little bit more of the white balance, how we can tweak that. On this clip, the only thing that I want to tweak a little bit is a contrast. I just want a little bit of contrast right there, and I'm pretty happy with the look of that clip right there. So let me show you guys it looks with the edit, with the color grade, and without the color grade. In this second clip, I want to show you guys a big difference. So my aim with the exposure on this shot was, let me focus on his shadows. As I said, the tone of this is kind of dramatic. That's why the highlights of the background are properly exposed, and he has a lot of shadows on his face. Based on that, let's follow the same principles that we're doing, the same process that we were doing. So Lumetri color, I start with creative. Let's do 150. Actually, let's drop a little bit. It's 210 on the right side, 2 orange, 140. I like that. Let's do 4 on the vibrant. It's pretty solid. Now let's go, remember curves. The first one, which is RGB curves, then the white one, white select, and we start with the shadows. Okay, that's more like it. This is exactly what we're looking. Remember, this is dramatic comedy skit, so this is the vibes we're looking for. Play with the mids, and this will get a lot more information. I don't want to push the mids too much, so I want to keep the vibe overall. That's kind of nice. Let's play a little bit with the highlights over here. That's pretty solid right there. Pretty happy with that. Let's add a little bit of vignettes. It doesn't make much sense because it's outside, but still I want to keep something that helps a lot with the vignettes is just keeping the edge a little bit darker. Makes your attention stay more focused on him. It's not like there's anything distracting of the frame or anything, but still it's gonna help a little bit more. And if we can maintain your attention as long as possible where we want you to, that's the ideal outcome with this edit, you know. Let's go now to basic correction. I want to add a little bit contrast. See, right here is pretty fine. Now I want to tweak, because if you see the shirt, his shirt's supposed to be like a dark blue, but it's kind of magenta-ish. So something that I want to test out in this one is play around a little bit more with the colors, with the white balance. Okay, it's a pretty all over the place image just because we're outdoors, so it's kind of warm on the tone. So the white balance, we'll have a lot of green in the background, but there's also a little bit of magenta on his skin. You can see it right here. This blue kind of has a magenta. His fingers has kind of like a magenta tone. So I want to see which one will be the correct white balance, you know. A quick tip that I can share with you guys is just trying to figure out if there's something real white, like white on the frame, that's kind of reflects the overall exposure that the image has. In this case, if you see the logo of his shirt says Dignitas, it's exposed on the same side that the light's hitting him, so it's pretty much the same tone. The correct, this is supposed to be white based on how the lighting is impacting the frame. So let's use that for a reference. Okay, let me zoom in over here. I'm gonna grab the dropper right here for a white balance. I grab this one, I pick the white point, and I back up. Nice. It looks pretty solid. I think it did a great job. A little bit too orange-ish for my opinion, but let's just keep it as it is. I really like how it looks, and I think that it did a pretty good difference between how we had it originally from Log, how we have it right now. So let me show you guys the difference on that. I think those clips give an excellent example, like the difference between an ungraded footage on the timeline and an actually basic color correction clip on the timeline. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Feel free to reach out in the comments if you have any more questions or you guys want to see any more tutorials. I'll be more than happy to make some more. See you guys on the next one.